Go to chapter 17. It says, verse 1, when they had traveled through Amphipolis and Apollonia, they came to Thessalonica, where there was a synagogue of the Jews. And according to Paul's custom, he went to them, and for 3 Sabbaths he reasoned with them from the Scriptures, explaining and giving evidence that the Christ had to suffer and rise again from the dead, saying, "This Jesus whom I am proclaiming to you is the Christ." And some of them were persuaded and joined Paul and Silas, along with a large number of the God-fearing Greeks and a number of the leading women. But the Jews, becoming jealous and taking along some sort of wicked men from the marketplace, they formed a mob. They set the city in an uproar, and attacking the house of Jason, they were seeking to bring them out to the people. And when they did not find them, they began dragging Jason and some brethren before the city authorities, shouting, "These men who have upset the world have come here also. And Jason has welcomed them. And they all act contrary to the decrees of Caesar, saying that there is another king, Jesus." And they stirred up the crowd and the city authorities who heard these things. And when they had received a pledge from Jason and the others, they released them. In other words, when they'd gotten some money from them, they let them go. And so the brethren immediately sent Paul and Silas away by night to Berea. And when they arrived there, they went into the synagogue of the Jews. And the Bereans were, as it says in verse 11, more noble-minded than the Thessalonians, in that they received the word with great eagerness. They were examining the Scriptures daily whether to see that these things were so. And there were many of them that believed, along with a number of the prominent Greek women and men. But when the Jews of Thessalonica found out that the Word of God had been proclaimed by Paul in Berea also, they came there as well, agitating and stirring up the crowds. And so immediately the brethren sent Paul out to go as far as the sea, and Silas and Timothy remained there. Persecution followed him constantly. And as we're here in John chapter 7, it's starting at an escalated point. Actually, it started in chapter 5. Go back to chapter 5. After Jesus healed the man who had been sick for 38 years, he told him to pick up his pallet and walk. Verse 11, they asked him, "Who told you to pick up your pallet and walk?" He says in verse 10, "It is not permissible for you to carry your pallet on the Sabbath." They had made up so many rules and bound so many people on what the Sabbath did not mean, that just to pick up your bed and walk, they considered it to be a work. And when they found out after this man met Jesus again in the temple that it was Jesus who had healed him, he went away and told the Jews that it was Jesus that made him well. And it says, verse 16, "For this reason the Jews were persecuting Jesus, because he was doing these things on the Sabbath." So they must have been Seventh-day Adventists. Sabbatarians that believed that only God could be worshipped on the Sabbath. Sabbath is what day? Saturday. Well, the crowd responds to what Jesus said in verse 19, when he says, "Why do you seek to kill me?" They didn't even hear what he said in the first part of verse 19. "Did not Moses give you the law, and yet none of you carries it out?" They ignored that part. In fact, they respond by hurling names at him. They said, "You have a demon." And now we see the crowd's denial. See, you had a large group of people there that were in the city that day for that feast. Actually, that feast that lasted for a week, 8 days. And so there were pilgrims from everywhere. And it's very clear just from that context, not everyone knew about the plot to kill Jesus. There were people there that were innocent, that didn't know about it. And so their response, in some way, at least the last part of it, "Who seeks to kill you?" makes sense. They had nothing to do with it. But as we read a few moments ago, they will have something to do with it later as they cry out, "Crucify him." So they abuse him. They said he had a demon, and they challenged his statement that any of them was seeking to kill him. Well, let's analyze what they said. Look at their statement. You have a demon. The word demon, that adjective right there, is used as a noun, and it means some kind of evil spirit. See, they were resenting his allegation. They were accusing him of being possessed by an evil spirit. Irrationally paranoid is what they were saying. You're gone mad. You're deranged. It's almost like saying, you're out of your mind. Somebody accuses you of something, you're innocent of it, you would respond the same way. So they resented him. And though verse 20 says that this came from the crowd, there are other passages that seem to indicate it came from the Jewish leaders. For example, go to chapter 8 and verse 48, and you hear him repeating the same thing. It says, the Jews answered and said to him, did we not say rightly that you are a Samaritan and have a demon? Who said this? They're quoting exactly what was said there in verse 20. Go even further. Go to verse 52. They say it again. The Jews said to him, now we know that you have a demon. And we find it even again in chapter 10, verse 19. Says a division occurred again among the Jews because of these words. And many of them were saying, he has a demon and is insane. Why do you listen to him? I like what the others say, verse 21. These are not the sayings of one demon-possessed. A demon cannot open the eyes of the blind, can he? So it seems to be that maybe this response was not just the crowd. Maybe it was the leaders that was instigating that in the crowd. I mean, they had already instigated in verse 15 by that question, seeking by saying this to the crowd, how has this man become learned, having never been educated, that is, having never been brought up by one of the prominent rabbis? Notice again their question, who seeks to kill you? Again, it may reveal the ignorance of many, and many of them, like I said, were ignorant in the crowd of the plot of the Jewish leaders to kill Jesus. But it was confirming with accuracy of the indictment by showing their graceless hearts. They might not have been seeking to kill him or been guilty of that as part of the plot of the Jews, but listen to how they treat him. You have a demon. You're insane. You're mad. Why'd they have to say that? Why didn't they leave that out? Why didn't they just say, who's trying to kill you? We don't know anything about that. So you see their graceless hearts. And again, ultimately, they will reject Jesus with equal enthusiasm, screaming out for his crucifixion. And listen, the sentence of guilt for violating the law is confirmed by their hatred of the Son of God who fulfilled the law blamelessly. A.W. Pink said, here Christ completely turns the tables upon them. They were saying that he was unlettered, and now he charges them with having the letter of the law, but failing to render obedience to it. They professed to be the disciples of Moses, and yet there they were with murder in their hearts, because he had healed a man on the Sabbath. He had just declared that there was no unrighteousness in himself. Now he uncovered the righteousness or the unrighteousness which was in them, for they stood ready to break the sixth commandment in the Decalogue.